I have a priest friend. He's a classmate of mine, ordained with me, and so I've known him for about 50 years through seminary and priesthood, and we've watched many movies together or television show, and he gets very involved. He starts arguing with the TV. Don't go in that room. Oh, he's an idiot. I can't believe it. And why did he have to say it like that? That is so wrong. And I said, it's just a movie. It didn't happen. It's not real. Now, don't get me wrong. I cry at movies all the time. I'm a big baby. Commercials sometimes do me in, So I get emotionally involved, but he actually treats it like it's happening, like real life in front of him. And I suppose it looks like that because, it's so real. I remember 9/11. I just had surgery on my hips, and so I got up late one morning, and I get a phone call from a friend. Turn on the television. Have you seen it? We're being attacked. I said, what? I turn it on. Well, to tell you the truth, I didn't believe it at first. Because I've seen so many movies like this, I've seen Godzilla on top of the Empire State Building. It all looks so real. So it was hard for me to take it in that actually was happening. So I can see why people get involved. And actually, in a way, he has it right, because whatever is happening on that screen and whatever I'm seeing here is just the beginning. The real issue is what happens then inside. And the whole point of a movie, the whole point of a story is to engage us in a way that our insides get touched, moved, and we become something more, something different. The scriptures, I think, really are like ancient movies, because when you stop and think about it, since they didn't have screens and electricity and couldn't project things, they had to contain it all in a story with words. They had to create an image that was so powerful, first of all, that people remembered it. Because all these stories of the Old Testament were told for about 800 years before a word ever got written down. And they were preserved orally in tribes, and then collected, and then edited slowly over hundreds of years. So they had to be remembered, and so they're very vivid stories, but also the story themselves, the action in them is quite moving. And the point is not just to read what happened or didn't happen, whatever, but for whatever we say happened, for it to engage us in a way that we become different. So we take the first movie, the first story. We've got Elijah. He's running from something, and he goes to hide in a cave, and the Lord comes to him and says, the Lord's going to be passing by. Get out there on the edge and wait. So he does. He's going to stand before the Lord, and then comes these big winds. Rocks are shaking and crashing. He doesn't find the Lord there. Then there's an earthquake. Now let me tell you, I was in South Central during one of the earthquakes. I was in a neighborhood where the African Americans and Latinos didn't seem to know each other well. They were afraid of each other. They were ignorant, really, of each other. And so they often just wouldn't even talk past each other and not say a word. But that earthquake came, at 2:30 in the morning, I go outside. They're hugging each other like old friends, kissing each other's babies. It's amazing what an earthquake can do. You find God in an earthquake, really. But he didn't find God there. And he didn't find God in the fire, the blazing fire. But then there was this whisper, barely audible. And that's where he found God. Now, of course, God's in all of those things, but where do we find God? Because it's different for each of us. I know I was trained in the seminary for 12 years to find God in silence. It's my preferred way of praying. I don't like a lot of hullabaloo. I love the music. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I did music for 12 years too in the seminary. But I need times of silence. I want everyone to be quiet so I can just reflect and be. And we were trained as teenagers. My goodness, we were in the chapel constantly, it seemed. And we'd read a meditation, then just have to be still for 40 minutes. That was torture for a teenager, at least it was for me. But I began to love the silence, and the silence really spoke to me louder than a lot of the words. And we're asked to find God, I think in a very special way, in the silence of our hearts. Then we have Paul. This is quite a reading. He's kind of betwixt and between. He's caught, he's bewildered because Paul has fallen in love with Jesus Christ. He says he's my Savior. He called himself, he said, I'm a super apostle. He was ready to lop off his own head, anything for God, anything for Jesus. But he was saddened that his Jewish people, because he was a very strong Jew, had not found the Christ. And he even mentions, look, they had it all. They were chosen. They were given the promised land. They were in covenant with God. There were promises made and promises kept, and faithfulness and unfaithfulness, but love. And it all leads up to Jesus the Christ. But they didn't recognize him. So he says, I would willingly forsake the Christ. I would let go of the Christ if my people could find him. What a story. Are we that anxious to know the Christ? At the end of Mass, just to remind me, someone who went on my retreat is going to share a few words. I hope they're good words, but we'll see. On the retreat, the whole point is to meet Christ in a way that's perhaps more powerful, more engaging. We listen to his words. What do you want, Jesus? What do you want? And in listening to the Christ, do we get called in deeper places within our heart, like where we long for God? Does Jesus reach in there? Well, the point gets made, that point, even stronger in the gospel today. And this is one of those stories where it looks like Jesus is manipulating this whole thing with grand purpose because of the way the events are laid out. Now, did it happen or didn't? I don't know. I have to admit that there's two stories in a row that leave me kind of edgy with, really? Did it happen just like it said? Because listen, the story right before, in fact, the first line of the gospel says, they just got through feeding thousands of people with this bread and fish. You remember the scene, it was last week, I think. And it says that Jesus came to the shore and there were thousands of people. I think it said 4,000 men, which then meant 4,000 women. Their wives would come and their kids, say another 2 kids apiece. That's 8,000, 12, 16,000 people, let's say. And so Jesus says, again, with purpose, well, you should feed them. He said, well, how could we feed them? We've collected all the food we could find, 2 fish and 5 loaves. So Jesus says, have them sit down. He blesses it, and va-boom, 16,000 people are fed. Really? Now, who could see that and not believe? And don't tell me people were back a half a mile. Maybe they didn't see it happen. Everyone's chismoso. The word gets out. Let me tell you. They would have gossiped about that bread before it even reached their lips. Everybody would have known. They forget it? It's like they see Christ and then they unsee him. You don't unsee things. If a terrible accident happens in front of you, you never forget it. You see it and you don't unsee it. It sticks. And if something happens to your heart, I don't mean your physical heart, but inside of you, you're moved, something powerful brings conversion to your life, you don't unsee it. You may not be faithful to it, but you don't unsee it. So how could people see thousands fed and then they don't recognize him as the Christ? And then we get this story of walking on water. Talk about unseeing something. It's real dramatic. Jesus finishes, they finish preaching to the crowds and feeding them. So he says very purposefully to his disciples, you guys, get in the boat and go across the sea. Get out of here. Go. He sends them off. And then he dismisses the crowd, sends them off. Then he goes up a little on the mountain and he begins to pray all by himself. And hours pass. He's alone at night. And then on the 4th watch of the night, and I've asked this at 2 masses, nobody knows, and I don't know. What's the 4th watch? What time is that? Anybody know? Nobody knows. Google it. Not now, later. The 4th watch. I'm assuming it's real early in the morning. And it says that the sea was very choppy. The winds were going against the boat, and so they were bouncing all around. And all of a sudden, Jesus Christ is walking on the water. On the water. And they become terrified. It's a ghost, they say. It's a ghost. And he says, it is I. Don't be afraid. So then Peter always gets brave after the fact. He says, well, Jesus, if it really is you, command me to walk on the water. So he says, come. He gets out of the boat and he does it. He's walking on water. But he gets terrified, becomes afraid, begins to sink, and he cries out, "Save me, Lord." Immediately he reaches out, but he says to him, "O ye of little faith, O ye of little faith, don't be afraid." Now I'll save the end of the story. If it happened just as it was said, and you saw that, I mean, listen what the disciples will say, "Truly you are the Son of God." Once you say those words and you say them and believe them, how could you ever go back on it? How could you unsee it? It doesn't make sense. But maybe all of this is given to us by the evangelizer because he wants us to experience something. And there's so much miraculous with Jesus, it doesn't matter on one level. What matters is how we take it in and what we begin to discover in our own relationship with Jesus. So, has Jesus ever walked on the waters to you? To me? Really, has he? Because in one level, it seems to me, unless we have found him walking on waters so turbulent in our life that he comes to us over those waters, he reaches to us, he invites us to walk out on the waters with him. I'm wondering how we can really believe if the Lord has never walked over the waters of life to us. And come on, let's face it, we all have those choppy waters, don't we? I won't ask for no hands, please. This is all rhetorical. But there are people sitting in here with financial difficulties, with relational difficulties, with health issues, with faith issues, with doubts, with angers, with hurts, with past, with regrets, with shame. It's all here in all of us. Some of us have something, some of us have it all. We're sitting here. These are our choppy waters. The question is, does Jesus Christ walk across those waters, come right to us, and do we see him? And if we see him, won't we be changed, or will we later unsee him? Well, maybe it wasn't him after all. But what if we had the audacity, like Peter, to say this, "Lord, if," because I have my doubts, but if it is really you, tell me to come. And he says, "Come on, come on." And we get out and walk on those waters and find we're not so alone. But we have our doubts because our fears are big and great, and we begin to sink. And the best part is we cry out, "Lord, save me." He reaches out and takes us by the hand. Now this moment, if I were making the movie, I would take over like a director role so much, I'd shoot this scene about 37 times. No, I don't like the face. A bit of a smile. No, too much. I'd want Jesus with the wry little smile to say, "Oh, ye of little faith." Uh-oh. 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 I would want Jesus to have on his face, see, that was, thank you, that was planned, attention to the face of Jesus, and then roll it again, and he just kind of shake his head, not with disgust, not a put down, nothing, not like shame on you, but just a kind of a smile in his heart and face saying, "Oh, ye of little faith, don't be afraid." Because there's really nothing wrong with becoming afraid. There's nothing wrong with having doubts. There's nothing wrong with not having the answer. There's nothing wrong with taking time to get there. He takes us as we are, and he always reaches out to grab our hand. "Oh, ye of little faith, don't be afraid. Here, I'm here." Now, maybe it happened exactly as those words on that page, and he actually physically walked on the water. If I raise even a doubt in my mind, let alone yours, and when I get up there to heaven, he says, "Perry Leiker, you fool, you said that, how dare you? This is the truth." Okay. But it doesn't matter to me because the story engages me completely. Because I know what those choppy waters are. We all do. I know what those fears are. We all know them. We have them. And I know what it means to begin to walk, begin to stand up, begin to feel I'm okay, and then have doubts and begin to sink again. And what an incredible truth it is for me to have my Jesus, my Christ, reach out, take me by the hand, and gently say, your faith is little, but come on, trust. And the hope is that, like those disciples in the boat, and don't they always get it at the end? Truly, you are the Son of God. And yet, how many were there at the foot of the cross when he died? Only in John's gospel, I'm just saying. How many were there? How many were so sure of themselves and had seen the Christ? They didn't unsee him when he was suffering. They had to be right there with him. So I look to my apostles, the disciples, and I say, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for being so real and human, for being able to fail so wonderfully, because it gives me confidence that I'm okay if I do the same, and my Lord is going to be there to reach out and take me by the hand. Today, it's all right if our faith is a little weak, if we can also, as we watch this film, recognize that the Lord will always, always be there.